Welcome to the Legacy Through Land podcast, where we're dedicated to empowering you on your journey to land ownership and management. I'm Tyler Markham, your host, and each week we'll dive deep into the world of land investing, management strategies, and the transformative experiences tied to owning your very own piece of dream dirt. With our expert guests, inspiring stories, and actionable advice, we're committed to helping you become a better land manager, hone your investing skills, and start building your family's legacy through land. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. We hope you'll enjoy.
All right now, y'all. Yeah, that's my stolen Timu Travis Kelce statement, but I do like it. I do like all right now. So what is going on in the world of us? I always give you guys the updates of what is going on over at my company, Legacy Acres Land Company, not to be confused with the Legacy Through Land podcast. But I'll give you a little update. As of the time of this recording, I have recently been out to one of my favorite places on this earth, which is West Central Illinois, the land of Lincoln. I have recently been to the land of Lincoln looking at some property leads. Truthfully, this was something we were going to talk about a little bit later, but I'll just go ahead and spill the beans that it is an aspirational goal of our team to transact a farm or two in Illinois this year, 2025, as a recreational farm flip. And I hope we can just normalize the term farm flip, because obviously if you followed anything we do not just put lipstick on a pig. We actually make intentional renovations to properties to make them better for hunting or recreational use. We don't just try to hide, crap properties with cool blinds or whatever you want to say. So we're going to do that. I was out looking at some leads, and I actually stumbled upon a lead that I just absolutely fell in love with. And this will be a little bit longer of an update than normal for me, but it's worth telling that I have to back up to give all this. I recently bought a farm in Ohio that was a farm I first sold. It was one of my first renovation properties. It was the Ross County 81 acres. If you've gone to our website, sold it in late 23. It closed in early 24. Told the sellers that, if you're ever crazy enough to sell this farm, call me. I'll buy it back. And I love it, but I need to sell it because I got to feed my family. And guess what? They called me. Some life happened for them. They were going to make a move out west, and they needed to sell a farm, and they wanted me to have it back, and I could not believe it. And so, gosh, it's such a long story. I'll probably unpack it on just an episode that just deeper dives into this, but they gave me permission to hunt the farm. It was in January that they told me they wanted to sell, gave me permission. And in 12 days or so, I did a big, massive bait dump and inventory gather and got a deer consistent. Did a hang and hunt, several hang and hunts, and in 12 days or 19 days, something like that, I killed my buck in Ohio last year. So that hunt will be out soon if it's not already out at the time of this airing. And I killed it on that farm, and it was a really great deer. Self-filmed it, felt really good about it. Brutal cold temperatures, January 19th, I want to say, latest I've ever killed one. So that is the same farm. And I say all this to say I'm going to have to sell that farm. Unfortunately, I did a 1031 exchange to buy it. I closed with cash, and I did a 1031 exchange on some money. And I really need that money to be able to buy this Illinois farm that I fell in love with for myself. I need every dime of equity and money and juice that I have, every dime, to pull this off. And God and I have been wrestling together on, is this an insane move when I just bought my Ohio dream farm? But this Illinois opportunity is absolutely once in a lifetime. And I just feel like I will regret it forever if I don't try my best. So I am potentially, as of this recording, buying a farm in Illinois for myself. Could not be more excited, but I've got a lot of stuff to pull off. So if you want to buy my Ross County 81 acre farm that is ridiculously good in South Salem, Ohio, it is listed as of the time of this airing, and it may already be sold. If you know how good it is, it may already be sold, but go check it out. So that's been going on for me. A little bit of chaos there. Again, I'll try to dive into that whole Illinois and Ross County 80 story deeper one day. But we've been trying to get some of our properties sold. For whatever reason, we've got a couple farms that just haven't sold yet. And if you haven't been checking our stuff, do check our stuff. I got good stuff. And we've got a farm in Jackson, Ohio, that's 95 acres. Really good farm, fully turnkey. And just for whatever reason, it hasn't sold yet. And we reduced it down. I want to say it's 364.9 for 95 acres right now. and hadn't sold yet. So that one's a really, really good one. Turnkey. Go check it out. Everything's been done. It is literally ready to close and climb, as we say. Close on it, climb a tree, shoot a deer. Great farm. Then the other one that we're working on repositioning, for whatever reason, we've got a big farm in Meigs County, Ohio, that's 195 acres, give or take, and it hasn't sold yet, and it's priced really good, and we're actually going to take it to auction. So as of the time of this recording, we're going to take it to auction. So if you've been eyeing that farm and you want to try and get a better deal on it, get ready for the auction. Me and my friend Jeremy Mills, who has been on here, he's going to do the auction. So that's going on. Actively working on how we're going to bring that to the market, but it's likely we'll have a 30 acre piece and like a 40 acre piece and like a 90 acre piece. If I have to, some of this, don't quote me, but we're going to offer it in 3 parcels out of that 195. One's going to be 90 some odd acres, and then the other 2 will be split like a 60 and a 30 or something like that. So be looking out for that. And then the last thing that I would say is, through all this chaos of buying my dream Illinois farm, hopefully, and having to sell my dream Ross farm that I was really excited about buying back, I also, my parents own a farm in Jackson, Ohio. It's a very large farm, 500 acres, that I have been very fortunate and thankful to call my home farm for 4 years now. It's been a project that we have put enormous amounts of time and energy into. And kind of the short version is, it's just far enough for me now that I've moved to Columbus that it's just been a stretch for me to try and manage that farm at this distance. And they live in West Virginia, and it's been a stretch for them to continue to help and manage. And they're not getting any younger. So we've made a tough decision that we're going to sell it. And it's had really great deer on it, and it's had incredible amounts of whitetail improvements to that property. It's got everything you could dream of. So if you're looking for a big piece, it's got it. Farmhouse, barns, buildings, electric, water. It's got, septic, whole house generator, geothermal heat, outdoor wood boiler. It's 500 acres, almost 40 acres of tillable. I mean, food plots galore, switchgrass bedding. We just did a timber improvement where we did not cut white oaks, and we did everything specific to whitetail improvement plan that Wes Delks with Don Higgins's group. Wes Delks came twice to the farm and helped me put together interactive and comprehensive improvement plans, which I have spent the last 4 years trying to accomplish. And yeah, I'm just short version is I'm ready for another adventure, and I'm ready to release my parents from such liability of having the commitment of that farm. And I'm going to try and buy something a little closer to me here at home. So anyways, big stuff going on here, but without more jargon for me, today's guests is my friends now over at acres.com. This software has been literally invaluable in my transition into buying and selling land. When you flip houses, there's a CRM and a software to run comps, and there's access to anything to help you be good at flipping houses. But when you start transacting land, it can be really daunting, really quick, really intimidating, really quick to try and go search for the answers you're looking for on dirt that potentially hasn't sold in 50, 100 years. So I really want you to dig in here. Listen carefully, whether you're brand new and just starting to flirt with land and the idea of buying dirt, or you're really seasoned and or a realtor, broker, appraiser, farmer, you name it. Acres.com is a place for you. Cannot wait for you guys to have your minds blown with all of the amazing tools and all the things that they have wrapped up into one piece of software. And they happen to be people that really know their stuff with land. So they're not just building a software to sell you a subscription. I can't say enough, but I'm going to go ahead and shut up. Let's jump right in. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Legacy Through Land podcast. I am incredibly excited about these fun, bright, spirited, beautiful people over here at acres.com. Used to be something different. It was a minute ago. It was acres.co, I think. And they just said, you know what? We want the M. We bought it. And they're now acres.com. Do I have that right?
That's right. We grew up. We're .com now, acres.com.
I still have the forwarder on my bookmark as acres.co. I'm not moving forward with you guys. I'm still in acres.co. But anyways, it goes without saying, the folks here at acres.com are going to be a wealth of information today. I literally use this software every single day. And so from transitioning from residential real estate and house flips and all things that have structures, the wide world of dirt comes with its own set of nuances and needs and concerns and tools. And these guys have really, really worked hard at being incredibly intentional in the space with offering a software that I think, and I will, shamelessly, they do not sponsor this podcast yet. There's, of course, room for us to talk about that afterwards. But I use their stuff every day, and there's a enormous amount of value that I get from their software. It helps me operate my business. It helps me do the things that I need to do with dirt that I used to do with houses. And so we're going to dive into all things acres.com, how you could utilize it in your world, whether you are a beginner. Let's just say you're a tire kicker land person. They have a space for you. And let's say you're a seasoned investor who does tons of deals and eats, breathes, sleeps this stuff. They have a space for you too. And last thing I'll say, and then we're going to jump right in because I don't want to hijack any more of their precious time. These folks have already given me questions and thought provokers that are way left field of things I thought they'd be comfortable talking about. So we gonna jump right in. But last thing that I would say, I was talking to them offline about this, is that when I recommend acres.com to anybody in the space that I'm working with, whether it's a real estate agent or a broker or a lender or whomever, I always tell them the thing that I like about these guys is anytime like I see a thing that could be better or I see something that could be tweaked, even just me, this lowly, deal guy in Ohio, it doesn't take like 3 weeks and they're always putting out a new update. Like every time you go on Acres, there's a new update. Every time I sign in, just the other day, it was like, wait a second, this is all new. There's all new stuff. And it's a constant, they are trying to push the needle forward. And so I just really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of slow moving softwares in the software space. That is not these guys. They are very forward thinking and sorry, I'm not trying to put, incredible pressure on you. You better come out with new updates every 2 weeks for the rest of the history of Acres.
There's one tomorrow.
All right. Of course there is. So guys, you know it. The things that I want to do on this podcast are empower you on your journey to buying and selling land, or build your belief to take those first steps, hone your investing skills if you're already in the space, or teach you how to be a better land manager. And it goes without saying, these folks can blow your mind with the access to data that they're providing, the access to the knowledge they've got. And we're going to jump right in. So thank you guys for being here with me today.
Oh, thanks for having us.
We're going to immediately sidebar here. Miss Audrey and I connected that she happens to listen. Wait, Ben, am I hijacking that you happen to listen to metal music as well?
I think Audrey's the true fan here.
Okay. So Audrey, how many emergency room visits due to mosh, pitting and crowd surfing? How many do you have?
It's a great question. Thankfully, only one so far. I'll say so far. I have been banned from crowd surfing moving forward. Lessons were learned. But you never know what's going to happen. I can get a wild.
Tyler, that's such a great way to introduce Audrey to everyone, because I think everyone's probably spoken to Audrey via email or phone, but probably don't know that side of her. Audrey, actually, why don't you introduce yourself just for the folks who haven't met you yet?
And I actually hate email. I'm hoping Trump, decides this is not a thing. So, email Audrey is really boring. Viewers, if you're a listener right now and you're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever, jump to YouTube so you can see these bright, beautiful, fun faces. And then mine's on there too. But Audrey, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Audrey Hickox, and I'm the Customer Success Senior Manager here at Acres. So I focus on making sure our customers are successful with the application, with a variety of use cases they bring to the table. So lots of just different challenges to navigate with our customers, and making sure that they are able to adapt their workflows with the software and bring technology into the day-to-day activities that they're doing with their businesses.
Whoa. Say your title again. I got to write this down.
Customer Success Senior Manager. And I like to think of it as the intersection of working with customers, making sure they're happy with everything that they're accessing in Acres, but also there's a lot of tech involved. So working with our development team really closely to make sure that the things our customers are asking for and saying makes it over to that side. And I have bit of a unique background. I started as a software engineer, actually, in GIS and mapping software. So able to bring that experience into Acres and just love the customer side of it. I love people. I love talking. I joke that I get paid to talk. So
I'm like not employable, but if I was, that's what I would want to do. Like if anyone just wants me to talk about it, whatever it is, I'll just, I'm the guy that's like, sitting at the table at a park and like ask me anything. And that's literally me, like over coffee. Let's debate oxygen.
I get in trouble for it. If I'm at an airport, I'll hit up the person next to me. Might not be everyone's favorite thing, but that's who I am. I can't help it.
Well, I'll give you a great opener now that I know you would talk to a random stranger in an airport. If my wife was in this room, she would say, yeah, this is his like number one opener. But it's my favorite thing to do in that kind of a space is just to randomly say, you guys are probably wondering why I gathered you here. And
so good.
It's good. It's not as good in the men's bathroom at a urinal. But it is a great response sometimes with like a full men's bathroom in an Ohio State game. It's a good icebreaker of like, you guys are probably wondering why I gathered you here. It gets some chuckles.
Hey, that could work at concert venues.
Yeah. You would have to yell it if you go to the same ones I do with everybody earplugs in and. Okay, so back here. If you've listened to my podcast long enough, it's just an eternal sidebar that we somehow try to keep together. Ben is going to be the moderator today. I'm handing that off to. He seems more organized, but all right. So that's Audrey. That was just kind of I think just tip of the iceberg. Assistant to the regional manager is what I heard. It's senior people talker to her, and she does a great job at that. Because it's funny, like a lot of the things and I'm going to low key bust their chops on this podcast because we're here and I have some questions about acres and we're on a thing. So they already say there's a new update coming out. Maybe they already have my answers, but I'll ask some questions and she's usually who gets them. And it sounds like does a great job making sure that the team actually gets to that. I mean, literally, I don't know if you actually prompted this whole, I think I told you I had to screenshot like parcels when I was doing, and then literally 2 weeks later, I do a market analysis and there's the full parcel view. And it was like, if that wasn't actually me, Audrey, just lie and say it was. Cause I feel like it
absolutely was Tyler.
Let's go. She's lying. But anyways, Ben, good luck topping that.
Yeah, right.
You're not a metal music fan, so we do have to know now what kind of music fan are you?
I actually listen to some of the same bands Audrey listens to, but for me, choral all the way, chamber music.
Lo-fi fruits.
I'll let you decide if I'm serious or not. But my role in the team is actually our head of strategy. So I've been working with Acres since we launched it in 2022. And what that really means is that I work with a lot of our customers, but then I also sort of, like Audrey does too, a liaison between the product development team and the customer's requests. And so we're always trying to figure out, all right, we've heard this request from 10 people. It's time that we finally put some attention and resources behind solving that problem. And so that's ultimately what my job looks like, spending time with customers all day long.
Okay, I love it. And if you guys don't care, just because for our listeners' sake, maybe you've never even signed on to acres.com. Please don't do that. If you're driving and listening to this, save it for later. It's really cool. But if we could jump into, because these guys, we're going to talk about acres.com, of course, but they want to talk about, and I'm really just excited to hear this from them. They want to talk about some of the things that customers share with them and things that they're seeing in the land space. Ben happens to be a broker. Don't hold that against him. I think he's probably a good one. And, that obviously can speak more volume to, they don't just sell us software for a space that they think needs a subscription, because we all know everybody just wants a subscription to sell anymore. Theirs is valuable. And so let's dive into, if you don't care, jumping straight into what is Acres. And my question for you two that I was going to ask, just because I think it's cool. I'm interested to know, how did you come to Acres? Audrey, you kind of said before, GIS, which I have to admit, like meeting you and seeing your personality, that sounds so boring being in GIS, but it is a necessary thing, obviously. How did you get to Acres?
Oh, that's a great question. I was a full-time engineer at another firm that was my first experience working on GIS and mapping software. And I had worked in marketing automation before that, loved it, but by happenstance found myself in mapping and really became interested in it unexpectedly. This was not a planned thing. This was nothing that I went to school for or had prior experience in, but just really enjoyed learning about land and geography and soils and crops and all of the different data that we bring into acres. Just became really interested and passionate about it. And to make a really long story short, had the opportunity to come on board Acres and be able to bring that skill set into working with customers directly and helping them to navigate the software, understand the tools, and really help in an industry bring technology to what they're doing day to day.
I love it. So, and you guys said this earlier, I just want to make sure if I can build a timeline. When was Acres inception?
Yeah, so we went with our public launch in 2022. So we've been growing it ever since then. And, I really came to Acres. I was there at the beginning as we started building the product, even before we commercialized it. But, my background was, you mentioned already, got my real estate broker's license. I'm an accredited farm manager. So I came from the land space, and you really gave the best sales pitch of the day already. So I don't really need to echo what you said. But basically what we saw in our brokerage and land management efforts was that there was not something fast enough, responsive enough, and deep enough in terms of capacity to meet the needs we had for researching and conducting due diligence for land transactions. And so it really all began with this idea of a problem statement, which is why is there not a better platform to get property data, sales data, mortgages, GIS layers, you name it, whether it be public lands or local zoning and sewers. If you're working on a higher and better use type property, that information lives in like 10 different government databases at the county, state, federal level. And so we just kept asking ourselves, like, why is this so complicated? And so that's really the impetus. My background came at it from a land perspective, but then really owning and living this problem of why is this not easier? And so that's really the impetus and the through line from 2022 to where we are today.
Man, it's so amazing they're saying all this because, of course, I have started to experience this at a deeper level since I have only focused on land for the past 2.5 years. You are exactly right. I mean, there's days I find myself in random Podunk Township meetings begging for a PDF, just like something. Just give me anything you have. And then they still don't have anything. And then you're over at the auditor's website. And then I'm using, and we're going to talk openly about other softwares that I hope you merge all this into one. And I think they're aggressively trying to, but we're going to say other words. Okay. Just plug your ears. But I do use Onyx Hunt Maps. I'm a hunter, like to kill stuff. I should say hunt stuff. My track record's not amazing at the kill part, but, in using all these softwares, we're always chasing answers. That's what we're just trying to find answers. And it's like, they're in 7 places. I'm actively onboarding an acquisitions rep to our company right now, actively to transact land. And he's bought and sold a lot of land back in the day. And already, like me showing him acres yesterday, he's like, dude, like this is like, it's a place for it to all live. It's like, yes, this is the point of one screen is my CRM where all of our leads exist. The other screen is acres. So this is fun. You said something I want to dive into. I didn't even know this was a title. You're an accredited farm manager.
Yeah, that's right. There's a fantastic group, the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, one of the oldest professional societies of, you call it land professionals. And they offer various certifications. They have a farm manager certification. They also have an accredited rural appraiser certification. And essentially all it means is that you have enough years of experience and enough classwork to earn this accreditation. And, it is a decent amount of work. And I would say for anyone who owns land and needs professional advice on thinking about leasing it out, or I'm not sure what the value is, it's a great group of people. They've got a database online. You can look up someone in your area, local to your area, and you'll know that, hey, this person comes with a lot of experience just out of the gate. So I always like to recommend people towards it. It's been a great part of my career and good group of people.
Very good. I'm going to mentally compartmentalize this, and this is for the AI transcript. Say the society again.
It's It's the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers.
I mean, that was going to be my second guess, I was that. So, okay. So, just quick qualifying question. Were either of you ever FFA members? Were we ever FFA?
I was not. I would have been. I went a different route during my school years. I was very heavily invested in dance at the time, but visited the FFA barn frequently because all of my peers and classmates were involved. And I did do my equine science class where I bought off the teacher to be late to that class with breakfast burritos. So I was a big horse girl. I still am, but just don't have my horses anymore.
See, there's always actionable advice here. You guys think it's going to be in land. It's not. It's going to be in how to coerce people. And that is part of this game. Ben, were you in FFA?
Early.
Actually, you're going way back in time now, but no FFA in my past. I have won a few blue ribbons at the county fair for some produce I've grown. So
okay. He got that blue ribbon for that green thumb. Let's go. I was in FFA. I was a lot like you, Audrey. I was teetering between the black hair and the girl jeans, and then also liking small engines and liking to be on the farm. So it was a tough, it was just the dichotomy between being emo and or a small engines FFA state champ. So
went to the intersection now.
I still know so many things. I can start the whole. I believe in the future of agriculture, I believe in the future of whatever, with the faith born of words, not of deeds. Yada yada yada. I can start that creed. I can't finish it, but anyways, no FFA. I just felt like, Ben, that society probably had a prerequisite. You have to be able to run a mile so fast, and you have to have been in FFA, or you're not considered. Jump. Obviously, we're all having fun here, but jumping into it probably goes without saying they have some uniquely qualified and equipped folks over there. And I don't want to open your guys' cards in your vest to any kind of a inside spoiler alert on updates or where you're at. But just for me to know, for my own curiosity, what is the size of the team at Acres today? I think this will be fun in 2 years to look back on. Like, where is Acres today?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a quick overview. So acres.com, we're based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We're both sitting there today, Audrey and I both. And we're on a team of about 70 folks here in Fayetteville.
Okay.
And that's going to be split up between product developers, engineers, sales folks, customer support like Audrey. So really running the whole gamut. We got a couple dozen people here. And, you mentioned at the beginning, like, it feels like things are always coming out and always new. And frankly, that's a byproduct of us investing really heavily in technology. So you talked about uniquely qualified people. I'm not sure I'm one of those, but we have a couple of PhD scientists here from the University of Arkansas that we brought over. They now run our data science efforts. And it's what distinguishes us from everything else out there, is that we're fast, we're serious, and we have a really big team.
I listen, that is not hype. I'm a firsthand experienced that. So fast is impressive to be able to say, because I'm running a small company, and you guys are in the space you're in. You're a small company in the space of software, but you're doing the things that very few small companies do well, which is pivot fast, listen faster. I can't say enough. So let's keep going here, because I want people to know what in the world is Acres and what in the world can you provide to the space, because it is it's an elephant to the space. Who is an ideal, we were talking about this before we started recording, who's an ideal client, or who are some of the typical clients that utilize Acres? And I'll let you two decide who answers what.
Audrey, I'll take it, and you fill in any gaps I miss. So I would say our primary client is anyone who engages with land, right? So that could be a buyer, a seller, or someone who provides services around land. So to be more specific about that, real estate brokers, ag lenders, title companies, appraisers, we talked about them earlier. So what you really have is buyers and sellers, and then the whole industry of folks who provide value and service around land. And so for us, it was this realization when we built the product that, okay, if I'm working commercial real estate, or you mentioned, Tyler, you've got a background in residential real estate, there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of information, a lot of data. I can go figure out how many square feet that house is, what year it was built, how many beds, how many baths, who the past owners were, all that stuff. when you start looking at 40 acres of pasture, the amount of information available to you drops dramatically compared to a structure in commercial or residential real estate. So really, I walked you through those customers sort of as a segue to think about what is the problem we're solving, which is a lack of certainly centralized data, but in some cases, is any data at all when it comes to evaluating and underwriting a land transaction. So that's who our customer is, someone who's uniquely interested in that question. But Audrey, what did I miss?
Yeah, I think this will just underscore that point, is being able to offer a comprehensive and all-encompassing tool where the customer is not having to go to those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sources to be able to find not just the data, but the mapping capabilities and tools, portfolio management, being able to map out their collateral portfolio or their prospecting portfolio, as well as has marketing tools to be able to engage with the folks they're concerned with. So centralizing all of these different areas where they would have to go otherwise, that are maybe dated or not updated frequently, they can't find what they want, and they have, what I've found, a lot of manual processes to bring all of this together, that they could be faster, they could be more effective with it. And so that's what we're trying to bring, is just this adoption of their processes into Acres and being able to get what they need, all the information they need, better, faster, smarter.
Yeah, Tyler, we should talk maybe later today about where we get data, how we ingest the data, because there's an interesting story there too. But as Audrey was talking, one of the things that came to mind of who uses this thing, we kind of walked through a traditional person who's looking at ag and recreational type uses for rural land. One of the things we've seen in our business, which I think maybe paints a broader story about what's going on in the land market generally, is we see a lot of people who are interested in land, rural property, for non-ag and non-recreational uses. So that's going to be home construction. It's going to be power generation and power transmission. It's going to be data centers, right? So these are all things you may hear about in the news, but the reality is that all of those industries need land as a common resource, and as a sort of fundamental building block of their enterprise is land. And I think a lot of people look out their window and say, well, gosh, we've got a lot of vacant land. There's certainly a ton of pasture land around our office. But when you really start thinking about what is that bullseye of, is the site buildable? Is it in a flood zone? Is it the right zoning? Is it utilities? The number of properties that fit any of these non-ag and sort of higher and better uses is pretty narrow. And so we have a ton of people who use our software for that. And it kind of frankly surprised us in the beginning, because it's certainly most of our early customers were ag focused, but now there's probably just as many, if not more, who are doing tasks that require land, but not necessarily for recreational or production ag focus.
Yeah, and I do want to dive deep into this, because you talked about just some of the things you guys are seeing with data centers and these types of folks that are using the software. Obviously, I'm here to learn. I'm transacting land. This is what I do for a living. I'm here to learn. Any tips, tricks, insider advice you've got, or anything to be studying or focusing on, I'm here for. If I'm not going to hijack the space for them to actually go into like a screen share and let's dive into Acres, as bad as I may want to at times. We're not going to do that today. I will say, and they have done this for me multiple times, where we've gone on and visually worked through just, hey, here's a new feature, here's a new demo, and I tell my team, it feels like we need a new demo like every 30 days, because they keep doing new things. So we need to get on a new demo and see, like, what is this tool? How do you use it? What is it designed for? Because a lot of times, I think, I don't even know what I don't know at certain times, where you're talking like data centers are using Acres. Okay, well, what are the criteria that data centers are looking for, and how are you helping deliver this to them in a palatable and digestible way? Obviously, that's your guys' goal, is accomplish what the user wants, create the digestion for what they're after. So maybe we sidebar now into, or we can do it later. I really would love to know, even if you could just give some examples of, if it is data center or if it is some of these non-ag, non-recreational uses, what comes to mind, and how are you helping tackle the challenges for them?
Yeah, I would say let's just pick data centers. So we already talked about it. I'll just give you like the really brief, how might someone in that industry utilize this information? So first of all, the rise of generative AI has put a huge demand on the ability to locate new data center construction. And the timeline to build one of these things takes years at the best case, including permitting and construction, et cetera. So we have a huge deficit of computing capacity. And so there's almost like an arms race around the United States to go locate these data centers. And so when you look around, you say, all right, how am I going to make a decision about locating one of these things? I know I want to build one. I know I have the budget to build one. Where am I going to put it? There's a kind of basic checklist and then an advanced checklist. So in your basic checklist, and these are all things we're going to have in acres, but first of all, you start with, all right, I know I need a property that is at least, I'm going to make up this number, but at least 100 acres in size. And it needs to be zoned I1 and industrial 1, and it needs to have at least 200 kilovolts of electricity running to it. And it needs to have a source of fresh water from the city being piped out to it along with a sewer connection. All right, so call out your basic stuff. You might also look at like the elevation and slope of the property so you know you're not going to spend a ton of money on moving dirt around. But that's your basic checklist. And you can get all that in acres today. You can overlay it all and see it at once. The other items where you might get to your more advanced or more sophisticated checklist is going to be, where is everyone else building? And so that's where we start to get into some of our derivative data products, right? So when we think about what is the value someone gets out of acres? Well, first of all, we originate all this information. We've already talked about a lot of it, like the county parcel data and the local zoning map, all that stuff. We visualize and originate it in the system. But then you can conceive of this thing of derivative data, where we take all those data points and create a new synthetic data point that tells you something that you wouldn't otherwise know. It's a intuition and a piece of knowledge instead of a piece of data. And so what I mean by that is you can basically turn on certain layers inside of our system and you could visualize, all right, where are other people building data centers right now? And it's basically a heat map of that. And so, yes, you've got your standard checklist of site diligence items and site selection items. But if you want some like true competitive intelligence, you can also utilize our derivative data products to find some of that. So that's a short answer to how they use it, but I think provides a pretty good overview of the workflow.
All right, we're going to need to cancel this podcast. I need to dive deep with them. I can't even make a sentence after that. So I want to unpack what you said earlier, make sure I heard you right. So the layers, you talked about water, sewer, how many kilovolts of electricity, all these things. These are, I'm guessing you're telling me these are layers that are already currently built into acres that can be overlaid on the property.
Yeah, that's right. So, what we allow you to do is the most basic building block here for your map is, okay, I got a parcel map. I know who owns what and how many acres it is. Then you start basically just turning filters on. You're like, okay, well, I need it to be in the city limits of, I don't know, Greensboro, North Carolina, and it needs to be zoned industrial. And so, yeah, you just turn these on one at a time. And what you do is you take an ocean of properties, there's 150 million parcels in the United States, and you boil it down to 50 that match your criteria. And then once you found those 50, you can use our system to basically build a comparative market analysis and make your offer. So it's the entire process of I want to boil the ocean and get down to my bullseye targets for my sites. And then once I found them, how do I put together a compelling offer? Well, you create a CMA in acres, you print out one of the reports. We were looking at some before the recording today, and you put that in front of a landowner. And then everything else is the art of the deal, as they say.
Yep.
There you go.
Pulling them up now. I do this every day. It uploads your icon for your logo. You look super sexy. I mean, I've had multiple sellers that are like, golly, you really are good at this. And it's like, I have a logo.
Our job is to make people look smart. So
yeah, so we absolutely, when this podcast is over, we are going to talk about when you can help me deep dive, because we are, in my company, we're getting a taste for commercial land. And when I say commercial, just land that is much higher and better use than agricultural. And I grew up on a farm. Okay. So love me some farm ground, but what I have found, and you guys can laugh and say you found this as well, but I have found that sellers know what the market's bringing and they would like that market price, but oftentimes they don't want it to not be farm ground anymore. They want it to stay farm ground, but they still want 25,000 an acre or whatever that is in my market. And I have to tell them, Joe Smith got 25,000 an acre because that thing's not going to have corn in it next year. Okay. That went to DR Horton, who's going to you're going to have houses. So you cannot like it. You cannot like that. But if you want 25,000 an acre, this is what's going on it. There's a higher and better use. It's higher density thereafter. And so what I would love to know what you're saying about that. if I could actually overlay the utilities that are currently available on a property, that would be something that saves us enormous amount of time looking through what is the water and sewer capacity and how do we turn these layers on. So openly admitting I'm apparently only using acres.com as a notepad, but there's growth for everybody, right? There is growth for everybody. So
I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because
that I'm using it as a notepad, or that there's growth for everybody?
both. So part of the challenge in building a good product is it has to be simple enough that someone can pick it up and intuitively use it, but deep enough that it has the highest end functionality to answer really difficult questions. And so when we have our probably our most intense internal debates, it is around this question of how do you provide high level of functionality while keeping it elegant and simple to use. And so we're always open to feedback on how to improve that sort of fine balance, but it's definitely one of the harder things when you think about building a product for people.
Honestly, it is, in the real estate space, having come from residential, like you said, there's a lot of tools that do a good job at helping analyze and build comps and build, interactive data and brochures and things for sellers and buyers alike. But yeah, you get into the land space and it's truly, it's vast. It's vast. And honestly, I've really liked that, because I think the old saying, the riches are in the niches, it's kind of its own niche. It's a niche, if we're going to be cool here and sophisticated. But with the niche, you got to kind of learn different skill sets, and you got to be able to find the answers you're looking for. And for me, and you've already seen it, sometimes I'm at a stage in my career, I don't even know what the question is yet. But you guys know that question's going to come up later in people's journey, that they now have the question and they now are looking for the answer. Before, you don't even know the question. You don't even know the question to ask.
But the beauty, Tyler, is that, we launched at the end of 2022 and we got 500,000 subscribers already, and they all have lots of questions. And so I think Audrey probably more than myself these days, receives such a high volume of, can I do this? Or how could I figure this out? And most of the time we love those questions because they're fun and they're generative, and we figure out, okay, if we just tweak this a little bit, we can really help somebody unlock this problem or this challenge they're trying to overcome in considering a property. But I think what makes a product good and easy to use is receiving lots of user feedback and questions, and then taking action on them iteratively over and over again, because we see patterns, right?
Yep.
And so,
yeah, and I'll add too, the questions that we get, they're generative. We get feedback. It allows us, to be informed on what else we need to include, what other tools would be impactful. But I love the cases where the question is asked and we have that existing functionality. And I would say that happens more often than not. So being able to help guide to where to find that and integrate that with the rest of their process, it's really cool to be able to sit down and workshop that with someone. And they're excited about it because they have access to these tools. And whether they knew about it or not, it's that discovery process and leading them to that. So it's a lot of different questions all the time, variety of use cases, but that's where I think creatively myself and my team have the most fun, is being able to workshop that with our users.
I love it. So obviously, if people are listening to this and this is just an audio aid for them to hear about this cool echo chamber of acres.com and how excited we all are, do this for me and for a listener. Obviously, if you're a viewer, we're a bunch of beautiful faces here. They're true Midwesterners. I'm a transplant, but what if you're going to talk, that, hey, someone's going to arrive at acres.com for the first time ever, what are they doing with it? Like, could you give a brain download? Obviously not at the highest level that they're going to go and find a utility overlay, or they're going to go look for the hot map for a data center. Let's just say they're just like, what is Acres? What are you doing? What are they going to do when you give an onboard demo of, hey, I think we can provide some value to you? What are you telling people? What are you saying that Acres is? I mean, I know, but what is it in your brain? What is it other than this place that is a house for all the the answers? That's an elephant. Like, what is it to the brand new person who's just getting into land, or, hey, I do some things in real estate, or I'm a farmer, or I'm an appraiser. I'm hearing you talk about Acres and how cool it is. What am I doing? What am I doing inside of the software to get answers? What would you tell them they're doing to start? I know, loaded question.
Yeah, I'll take the first part, and then I'll let Audrey kind of answer
Okay.
from the perspective of maybe the onboarding, because I think she's done a lot of those. But when someone first lands on, first of all, it's desktop and mobile, right? So you can take it wherever you go. But it's going to solve this fundamental problem of, I want to know some information about that piece of land across the street. And I'm sitting here staring at it in a field, for example. And so that's going to include, hey, at our most basic level, because we do have kind of like a direct to consumer product, then we have a business to business product. But on the consumer side, a lot of times it's just like, I need a really good digital parcel map. And look, we solved that problem 10 years ago, right? There's been a lot of companies and a lot of efforts out there to digitize parcel maps. It's pretty well worn ground. And you start there as your most basic thing. And so some people really just want to answer that question of who owns what. Maybe they're kind of nosy and they want to drive around with a plat map in their hand and take a look at things. You start there, right?
Yep.
But beyond that, then you start going to these branches of, we talked about land professionals earlier, right? So if you're an ag lender, you want to look up who's doing all the lending in your area and who's doing most of the borrowing so that you can build an outreach and prospect list for your lending business. If you're an appraiser, you're going to use acres to value land, right? So collect comparable sales and see what is the potential value of this. If you're a broker, you might build a lead list of the largest landowners in the area and then print out marketing materials and embed maps on your website. So you kind of get a sense of everyone comes through the front door looking for maybe parcel data to begin with. And then depending on your profession, you start sort of going down a channel of, okay, this is my workflow for a certain type of data. That's how I see it.
Wow. Okay, Audrey, good luck.
Yeah, Ben, I think you hit it well, and it's maps and data for land people. And so when I'm doing an onboarding with someone, starting at a very high level, it's mapping and drawing capabilities with the parcels that they're want to find more information about. It's being able to highlight certain key points about the information and the data that they're finding, and then able to manage that in a centralized platform where maybe they're going from taking a spreadsheet of managing their leads or their notes on different properties. They're able to bring all of that into acres. So as long as I hit the mapping and data capabilities and then how they can manage that, and then from there you start to get into the weeds. They're coming up with questions. They want to know, can you do this? And it's sort of, step by step gets folks deeper and deeper into the product. But at a very high level, it's the information that they need now, that they can start utilizing now, the processes they can move over, and that, spreadsheets to acres is a very common one here. And equipping them very foundationally with that, and then over time building them into a really powerful user and discovering these other areas and these little pockets of data, something like utilities that they didn't know about, and be able to get deeper and deeper into it.
I have just, this is amazing. I have so many questions. And as soon as we're done, we're going to find a way for me to buy a custom package for you to train my team on how we can get smarter with acres. Because hearing you guys talk, we are just clearly flirting with what we could be using. We use it for sold comps. We use it for analyzing properties on the front end. But I have very little experience with layers other than like flood map or the, just general things that we would overlay. So this is going to be
Tyler, there's
fun.
A lot I can show you.
Oh man, I'm going to black out, but this is amazing. And the truth of that is it's deflating when you take a subscription to a software and you feel that pretty quickly it's underwhelming for you, or it's a very low ceiling. It's exciting for me as it is daunting to hear how high the ceiling is at Acres already, how high it is. And let's be honest, and still fairly new in the space, at how high that ceiling already is for what I can do with it. Man. Yeah, we're going to keep going because this is about, being actionable here and having fun, but I just am ready to cancel the podcast. You guys have heard enough. Please don't sell any more subscriptions in Ohio. And let's talk offline immediately and quickly. No, let's keep going here. The next thing that I kind of wanted to dive in with you guys is we've talked about how someone can use Acres, how they can make it actionable in their business. I wanted to talk about bugs on Acres so we can, give you some fun on my end, and maybe you're already working on these, but we did have a recent, really large update. We had a really big update. I wish someone, probably they sent an email, but like I said, I'm boycotting email. I just sipping my coffee, trying to run a comp, and it's like, whoa, like what is this iOS 16.9? Like what happened here? Everything's feeling different. So could we just pretend someone is on Acres and they've already come up for air, they see it, but now there was this recent update. And Ben, did you say there's another one coming? I don't know if I can handle another one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as a user of this, you should expect there to be new information. Well, frankly, there's new information in the application every day in terms of like transaction and listings data. That's updated daily. But we get changes to the user interface at call it a monthly cadence. And most of the time it's not particularly disruptive. The one we had this month was a brand new reskinning of the application. So yes, it looks quite different. But tomorrow, I'm happy to say this is this will obviously air after it goes out to the world, but we'll just call this the world release announcement.
You've been warned.
of our new base map imagery. So I think one of the biggest things people have asked us for is, hey, we want a higher resolution and a more recent base map image so that, we allow you to look at 10 to 15 years of satellite imagery going back through time, but there's a base map or default map that everyone sees when they log in and kind of navigate around for the first time. So we're going to be driving a huge update to that tonight. So if you log on at like midnight, you'll see it tonight. I know that's typically what you're doing on Thursday at midnight.
I was going to say, someone texts me like, bro, it's about to happen.
Yeah, that's right. But when you wake up tomorrow and you're having your coffee and you're working on your next listing or whatever, you're going to be able to see brand new base map imagery on Friday, April 11th.
Uh-oh. You've been warned. The cat is out of the bag. So I'm already excited because one of the chops that I was going to try and bust for you guys is and maybe I'm just too stupid, so I'm fully aware. I'm ready to like eat crow on this entire thing, but I really would like to see the contour lines on top of the satellite imagery as a hybrid. And I don't know if I'm just too stupid to turn this layer on, but it's either or so far. You have satellite imagery or contour lines. And our dear friends over at Onyx Hunt Maps, if you guys would ever happen to check those folks out, I know their map is awesome because it is a contour and a satellite. I'll tell you that. That's why I go back and forth there. You guys did the 3D imagery. I've loved that, how we can kind of swirl around on the property. We can see the contour lines. We can over exaggerate the elevation, if you will. But maybe I'm not smart enough. Ben, am I not smart enough? I don't know how to turn contour lines and satellite on as a hybrid.
Well, I would say you do have an opacity option for the elevation map. So you could basically shrink down that opacity and, either enhance or minimize the color saturation. So opacity is the first stop when you're going to do that. Okay.
Basically, he nicely said you can do it. All right. Moving on. We'll learn together. So before we're going to, we're talking about this ginormous update coming out, or maybe this one's not as big as the recent one. What was some of the key things that you guys can remember are in this most recent update? Because I really I saw this merge tool and I saw all these things and I'm like, that's cool, but now I don't know how to use it. I don't know what I'm doing. There's things that are different. What comes to mind when we talk about this most recent update?
Audrey?
Yeah, I think like Ben touched on, the reskinning of the application is a big one there. And so just an updated look and feel to Acres, and then being able to centralize a lot of tools that were maybe scattered throughout, or, people just hadn't seen yet, or unless they were specifically asking for that and utilizing. And so at the top of the map now, there's a centralized toolbar that it's really your tool belt. So all of these different drawing capabilities, or even functionality like our meets and bounds deed plotting tool, this is all centralized in a way that's easier to find, easier to use, and you don't have to leave the map to accomplish some of these different things, and be able to just work centrally from that map, and then be able to layer your data on top of it. So really a centralizing of tools that were available in Acres, making them even easier to use and allowing our users to operate faster within the app.
And when we say, I may be misunderstanding, but when we say layer data, is this data that folks already aggregating, or you are providing inside of Acres, or is this data that people can upload as well, or is it both and?
It's both. So the data that we had available, and then the data that we are feels like almost at a daily cadence, like Ben said, adding in every single day. So all of the different data layers that anyone wants to be able to visualize and bring in, and even layering those on top of each other. So if you want to pull up transmission lines and power stations, but also have your topo layer on. So a lot more cross compatibility with the data, if you will, as well as being able to use the different tools on top of that.
Okay. So something I wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier, Ben, that obviously some of the things that people use, such as appraisers or people that are using your software to run sold comps, something that I have gotten better at with Acres, but I'm curious if you could tell me this is how, this is the juice to the tool. Is when I go look at a farm, I select the parcel, and then obviously I turn on the sold land layer, and I just, and I might say this too cool, but I click the sold land button. Let's just be real here. And I zoom out, I start zooming out, and then these buttons pop, these little pins populate on the farm. You can see the price per acre. Obviously we can set filters for what we're looking for. I love that. See, this is the thing. They keep adding stuff. I like that you added the exclude land with improved assessments button. Thank you. Really quickly, I guess on that, I'm curious, how accurate do you think it is right now? And how are you, I know how painstaking it is for my team to try and exclude data when we go and aggregate it ourselves. And I told you guys how we do it. We try to exclude land with assessed improvements. And for our listener and viewer, assessed improvements in my butchered version is that there is a structure or some kind of an improvement that is the assessor in that area has assessed an improved value to the land because there is a structure on it. Is that the right way to say that? Good enough? How would you guys say it? What is an assessed improvement? And then how are you using this? How are you using this toggle?
Yeah, so let's dive into that. So you have raw land, and then you have anything that's a fixture and improvement to that land. And so, the counties collect this information because they want to tax you on it. So they want to say, okay, you've got fixtures and improvements, so that adds additional value beyond the raw land valuation. Therefore, your tax assessment will be X. And so in our system, we allow you to go in there and say, what's the bare land assessment? And then, so number one, what property taxes does this landowner pay every year? And then number two, what's the assessed value of the raw land? And then the assessed value of the improvements. Now, I always like this question because lay people, when they come to the land business, often will mistake assessed value for market value, right? And they'll say, what do you mean the land's only worth $5,800 or whatever, it's some wild number.
I'll buy every parcel for the assessed value right now. Send them over.
That's right. You should. That's a deal you should take.
Send them over.
Yeah. But so anyway, most people don't understand this nuance, which is that the assessed value of your property is derived by the county, and it is not indicative of the market value. It's certainly not like a zestimate of your property. The counties have sort of Byzantine and very old school ways of calculating this number, and it's determining your tax burden for your property. Now, on to improvements and your question about them. So one of the tricky parts about it is that I got
a question deep for him. I'm going to get him there. Let's go.
The county will assess everything from a garden tool shed on your property all the way to like a poultry barn, a multi-million-dollar livestock facility. And so when you think about, okay, let's go to this particular feature inside of Acres, which is I want to exclude land with improvements on it. There's a bit of subjectivity in that because what you are looking for and what most people using that function are looking for is I want to exclude stuff with a house, with poultry barns, whatever, stuff that's not raw land. But if it's got a lean-to shed that you park the old tractor in, that doesn't bother me. That's still raw land for all intents and purposes. And so when we built the application and that specific feature, it was really an interesting question of we need to set a threshold for what is, it's not binary, right? It's not has improvements, doesn't have improvements. It's doesn't have improvements exceeding a certain value, right? Because we don't want to toss things out that are otherwise good results. And so there is some subjectivity in it. It is imperfect because we have to draw a line somewhere, but the data itself about what's the improvement, what's its value, et cetera, all comes from the county assessor. And I already mentioned this once before, but it is an interesting conversation to talk about where does all this information come from? The most basic building block is the assessor's office. But what most people don't realize is that the assessors make an unbelievable amount of mistakes when they enter this data in.
No.
And those mistakes.
No.
I'm not putting any particular county on blast here, but what I will say
I will. Give me the space. I will. Goodness sakes.
What I'll say is that the mistakes are multifaceted, right? So the first mistake is I misspelled your name. So if you search for John Smith and they forgot the I, you're not going to find anything that John Smith owns. They do that all the time. The second mistake, they misdraw the outlines of your property when they upload it into their own system, right? So, okay, we just fudged the line a little bit, and actually it shows that you own this side of the road when you really don't at all. Third mistake is they attribute a multi-parcel sale to one parcel entirely. So it says it sold for $1 million an acre when you know that was 10 different parcels that sold together as a group.
I want to camp out there. That was one of my questions. Quit getting all my questions, Ben?
And then the fourth item that we see a lot of mistakes with is, I guess it's not really been a mistake, it's kind of an omission, which is they just don't digitize their records. And so while we get a monthly... Really? Well, you should come down to the Delta, down where we're at, where there's some places that are books only, no digitization. But what I'll say about this is that we get a monthly feed of all these assessors. You know, there's 3,100 some odd assessors in the United States, and we get a automated feed for most of them. Some of them are not set up on this system, and we literally still retrieve CD-ROMs in the mail of data from folks that we have to manually upload because that's the only way that they can deliver information to us. So anyone can go out there and put together a halfway decent parcel map, a map of landowners in the United States. But when you start doing this at scale at a national level and you move beyond just parcel information, and you also want to have reasonably reliable and frequent updates, you have to bring in a multi-pronged approach to data retrieval, because it's not just, okay, I'm going to plug into the national county assessor system and get the data. It's not that easy.
So you unpacked so much I couldn't write it down fast enough. Now I forgot my first question, but you covered like 3 of my bugs I was going to ask you about. Okay. So we'll just maybe repeat them because I'm ADD. Goodness, so you guys already, it's amazing. You guys already know this stuff that are some of the things we see on the ground level that is frustrating. And I'll bring it up, just maybe this is a thought provoker for me, we've seen some of these sold comps where it's like 20,000 an acre, but the parcel beside of it says the same LLC. The parcel north says the same LLC. So I go to the auditor's page after clicking those parcel numbers, and all those parcels sold for the same sales price that we're reporting on the other one that's 20,000 an acre, but it's not. Now we have to aggregate all this acreage. So, I know what the other question was. But I want to stay on that for a second. This was a bug I was going to ask you about. And I already know that Ben and Audrey and I already know that the culture over at Acres is not to shift blame or responsibility. I already know that. But they're probably going to say that it is the assessors. So we're going to see what he says. Pretend I didn't give the spoiler. Ben, what are we doing to fix this problem where we have a comp, or Audrey, whoever we want to throw under the bus? What are we doing at Acres to fix that issue? Where? And we want to unpack this for a listener, a viewer. What he's saying, and I'll butcher this, but what he's saying is like there were 7 parcels that sold. A farmer bought 7 parcels from another farmer or whomever, but they only attribute the sale to 1 parcel. So what happens in Acres is it freaks the system out, and Acres thinks that 1 20-acre parcel sold for $20,000 an acre because actually 200 acres sold for $400,000. And I now have a sold comp, and they have a sold comp in their system that's like 20 grand an acre. And you can look, there's usually signs on a map of, hey, John Smith, like he said, missing an I, bought this 20-acre piece, but also John Smith, missing an I, bought this one and this one and this one. And it's around, right? It's around that other one. So you can deduct, and I actually literally did this in a training for my guy. Like, you got to watch, you got to be careful. You can't just take that for the gospel sometimes because it can be fudged up. Is there a fix to this, or is this kind of, hope and pray and we'll fix assessors 1 county at a time?
So because you've already opened the door to it, I will blame the assessor.
Make assessors great again, right? Yeah, this is the campaign.
Right. But it's not all hope is lost. So there's 2 ways that I think about solving this problem. The first is something the user can do, and the second is something we do. So the first thing that a user can do is just use filters, right? So we allow you to filter everything from what crop is grown on the property to when it's sold to how many acres it is to the price per acre to the total price of the property. And so if you're in an area and you're working on pure ag values, like, use some filters that make sense to you. That's going to keep you, it's your first step, your first sort of check and balance on the system. Now, what can we do as a company, as a data provider? So we take all the assessor's data, we clean a lot of it. Things still get through that they've botched. So what do? Well, in our system, if you log in, you're going to see, and I mentioned we have a multi-pronged approach to data retrieval. So you're going to log in, you're going to see sales, and there's going to be a big yellow button that says courthouse. That means this is coming from the county assessor. We then have another big button that says curated. And what that means is that our team, all 70 people sitting in Fayetteville, Arkansas, are manually picking through this stuff and curating the data to fix these problems. Nobody else goes through this amount of trouble. It's a nightmare. It's expensive. It's hard. But it gives you a solution to this problem that otherwise doesn't have one, right? It's the only way to fix it is to go manually verify and correct these records.
So let's camp out here for a second. I thought curated, because also something that Acres does, and I'll butcher what the terms are, they'll clean it up, is you can contribute your own data, your own sales data to Acres. They haven't paid me for it yet, which we'll get to that. But you can do, what do you guys call it? Contributory data, or we select when we sell a property. You can select to contribute that sales data to Acres' database. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. So I mentioned the data comes from the assessors. The data coming from our team, curated is what we call it. And then the third, for everyone keeping track at home, is this optional program. You don't have to participate in it, but it's called contributed data. And it's particularly useful in non-disclosure states. So Ohio, you're lucky. It's a disclosure state, fairly easy-ish to get sales data. But you go to Texas, you go to Montana, you go to any of those non-disclosure states, they're not revealing the buyer and seller, the price paid, all this kind of information. And so what we do...
It's all bigger in Texas, you know?
That's right. That's right. And so what we do is we allow, again, totally optional to participate, but if you submit information to this contributory data network, it's like a peer-to-peer sharing system for sales data. And so you might have 10 records in Mississippi and someone else might have 10 records in Missouri, and you're both equally happy to gain access to those by virtue of contributing information. So we don't charge any more for it. It doesn't cost anything. All that's required is that, hey, you provide data, that other person provides data, and therefore you can both see what the other has opted in to contribute to the system.
Okay. All right. So now this is helpful. Curated, I thought was but okay, makes sense. Contributory is us.
And really what we're mimicking, Tyler, is a informal system that already exists, right? So if you talk to brokers, investors, appraisers, they're literally faxing each other appraisal reports and comp sheets and things like that. Sometimes cell phone pictures of paperwork. And It's like, okay, that's fine, guys, but why don't we just digitize this and make it seamless and searchable instead of sending cell phone pictures around of sales reports.
Yep. And let me give you guys a plug for a listener here on their curated, because this is amazing. You're telling me your team goes and finds these things. We could spend an hour on how they find these things. I'd be interested, but just last week I did a comp in Illinois. I was doing some comps for a property in Illinois, and for a personal property, and I saw some curated comps, and it was sales. It was an auction from an auction company in that area. And not only did that curated comp have the price per acre, but then it had a link to the auction listing, the data, which was the auction flyer, I was able to see every tract and what it brought at the auction. I was able to see the auctioneer's number. I was able to see everything, the pictures, the crop score, you name it, from that curated comp. And it was, and I've got an investor involved in the deal where it's like, there is no greater comp than 4 miles down the road, public auction, October of last year, this ground sold for X. Well, I'm not going to go to Google and do some kind of a search to find, I can't even imagine how I would find that unless I would know the auctioneer. I'm 7 hours away. I literally just went into Acres, rolled back on sold land, and boom, there's the purple curated. Here's your comp. So pat your team on the back for me. Also sponsor the podcast. But anyways, I'm really curious. When you say curated and they go find it, let's use this auction example. We won't take an hour, but I'm just infectiously interested in this. How are they finding that? Like, what an auction happened and it's now on acres.com. Who's doing that? Who is finding that?
Well, so first of all, the data obviously comes from both public auctions and then brokers themselves who are just sending us information, right? So the self-interest from the real estate agent's perspective is that I want to be known as the person who closes deals in this region. Acres is going to link back to my website. I'm perfectly happy to have them highlight my successful auction and then send people to my website, right? Like most brokers are thrilled to have that. We've got obviously a ton of traffic to our website and we don't charge them for any of that. So they're thrilled on that part. Who's entering it is literally just our team here in Arkansas. I wish it was more complicated than that. We use some.
Make something up, Ben.
That's right. Yeah, it's our patented AI algorithm to instantly upload sales data.
Data wizards.
Yeah, no, they need a cool title. I mean, they're the real American heroes.
That's the dirty truth of this business, is that it's the least sexy things possible to solve the most difficult problems. And so everyone wants it to be easy, but it's really just a lot of hard work and manual effort a lot of times. So our team here is the people doing it. You know, we've been talking about sales, but the other thing that's kind of interesting is real estate listings. So,
and really quick, Ben, before I forget, you're saying that a broker, I want to understand what you're talking about with a broker can have some kind of a connection between Acres and themselves with their comps where, like, I know I've been asked, like I sell things on land.com. Well, land.com will ask me, if I sold something, do I want to, allow them to contribute the data? Is land.com connected to Acres in some aspect of they give it to you? Or how is a broker connected to you in that example you gave?
So there's no connection, to be clear, between that firm and our firm. But in terms of how we have connections to brokerages, both for listings and sales data, it's kind of twofold. Either you build a direct connection with us. So some of the larger brokerage houses out there will just build a direct feed to us.
Like an API, or what do we mean?
Yeah, we have some API connections directly into those brokerages. Okay. And then some of the other companies that don't have a dedicated feed go through one of our partners. So we work with Land Broker Co-op, and then we also work with RealStack, and they both feed agents' listings. They syndicate effectively agents' listings into our system. And so if you utilize RealStack for your website development, you can send listings to us. And then obviously if you're a Land Broker Co-op member, your listings will be automatically fed into our system. So two ways, either direct or through a syndication partner.
Man, that's so awesome. So in my suspicion, this auction that I'm talking about that was curated, do you think, and it's a fairly well-known auction company out there, they seem very robust. Do you think that auction came to you guys through this RealStack connection, that they're likely syndicated that way, or do you think that they actually contributed it manually, organically?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question in this specific case, but it's one of those two options every time. So.
It's neat. I mean, for a listener, if you're a broker, agent, appraiser, whomever, it's to me, what it's costing them nothing, right? Audrey, Ben, Correct. It's costing them nothing to contribute to data, but it's gaining you everything. Yeah.
And like I said, it's the listing side too. It's not just the sales side, right? So we host all those listings, and there's plenty of places you can go research land for sale, right? I mean, there's not a lack of that in this world, but we actually allow you to see it on the map and do soil scores and satellite imagery. And it's if you're looking for land
analysis you can do on it and what you're able to actually, use that data for within Acres. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can actually run a price opinion for this listing you're looking at right inside of Acres, which is not something you could do on another web platform that just has listings in a list format.
Wait a second. Are you saying people can list their properties on Acres now?
Oh, they can.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta go.
Yeah, we've got we've got a ton of real estate listings on there across the United States, and if you're interested in having them on there, just reach out to us. Happy to get you guys plugged up.
I don't even have enough note paper for all this. Okay. All right. Well, clearly, I'm definitely the guy that's the smartest person in the room right now. So that I did not know. I don't know how I didn't know this. Is it a tab, or how am I not seeing this myself?
You can
call me dumb.
Yeah, if you're on acres.com, go to the top left. It says listings, and it's right next to the sold land. And we wanted this workflow where, all right, I want to see what's listed on market, what's closed on market, and then we also have mortgages, right? So what's financed right now. So you can kind of think through that as a typical checklist in your due diligence of, is this property listed? Is the thing next to it listed? Has it sold recently? And what is the debt load on it? So.
Well, if you can't be good at the land game after this podcast, you just probably don't work hard enough. That's all I will say, man. So another thing I wanted to unpack, we started on this, and this is the question you started in this area, and we're going to just open the layers here. The assessed improvements, exclude land with assessed improvements. I was really, really happy to see this feature. But what I'm curious of, and I want to paint a picture here of, I'm buying someone's property. They have 7 parcels and they have a farmhouse on 1 parcel and 6 parcels are ag. Two are just in our area. You've got timberland. Let's say 2 of them are timberland, 80 acres of timber. 4 of them are ag, and 1 of them has a home site. Well, does acres aggregate that John and Sally Smith own 7 parcels and 1 parcel has assessed improvements? So John and Sally Smith's other 6 parcels do not show up, or do they? Do you follow the question?
Yeah, but I don't know the answer to it. I'd have to dig in with our data science team. What I will say is you can easily search. So I know the first part to your question. I don't know the second part to your question. The first part is like, okay, if Jane Doe and John Smith own a farm and they own 7 other properties, and then those 7 properties are listed under various LLCs and non-real persons, you could do a search in our system and it'll look in every county assessor's office instantly and tie together entities and persons in one search. So it's not like I've got to know all the little farm LLCs that he or she has. It'll link them all together. As far as your second part to your question of does it search and filter all versus the assessed, I don't actually know the answer to that. I've never been asked that question, but we can dig into it afterwards.
Yeah, dig into it. I mean, we have been studying, and on our end, I'll tell you guys, we still manually aggregate our data just because we are kind of split testing. And when I say manually, we are calling the assessor's offices. Be proud of us or laugh at us, whichever you choose. But we're getting their mass appraisal list, and I'm giving all my cards here, so better listen in, listeners. We get their mass appraisal, and then we have a girl who actually aggregates the acreage for John and Sally Smith. She aggregates that they have 11 parcels, and that comes up to a total of 186 acres, which you guys do inside your software. But the little niche that we're trying to dance around is one of the parcels has their house on it, and it's got assessed improvements. So we're all just curious, is Acres kicking that piece out? Because John and Sally Smith have 7 parcels adjacent to each other, all contiguous, right? But one's assessed improved value. I would be curious to know if your data people could find out what is the answer to. Honestly, it'd almost be like, could there be another toggle of include assessed, somehow include assessed improvements on all total aggregate acreage, or exclude just the one parcel that has the house? Do you follow me?
Yeah, we'll have to chase that down for you. I don't know the answer to it.
Yep. Well, and for our sake, what's the real example of why does it matter? Well, we may still be interested in purchasing the 6 parcels from them, or 150 acres of their 200 acres, but we're now not mailing them or marketing to them because they have improved value, but they own 200 acres and a house. So we're missing them because there was improved value because we turned it on. Does that make sense? See, and watch today, just so you guys know, today is April 10th. They'll have me an answer by the 11th, and there'll be an update on the 12th. This is just how they work. I know, by the time this airs, it'll already be figured out. But that was one of the bugs that I was going to talk to you guys about is, with that button, it now garners the question from us of like, how is the button assessing who's getting kicked in and out? If someone owns 1 parcel and there's a house on it, I think it's simple enough. There's assessed improvements, or like you said, poultry barn, buildings, whatever. If it's 1 parcel, it's simple. But if it's 30 and there's assessed improvements, are we seeing the other 29 or the other whatever, because they're not recognized? So anyway, maybe it's an easier answer for the folks that know that, if it's just that is the individual parcel having any kind of assessed improved value or not. Maybe that's the black and white answer, but it remains to be told. I can promise you guys before this comes out, they'll already have me an answer. I got another question too, and you already you dove into this, but the sold land, you guys are saying that, if the assessor puts it in as 1 parcel and it was, they don't attribute all the other parcels to the sale, then it can fudge the comp. And we talked about are you guys in your data scrubbing team, and what was the cool name we gave for the real heroes of Acres?
The data wizards.
The data wizards team. Are they, let's say our team says, hey, we see one, Audrey, Ben, hey, we see one. We're running comps. Here's a farm. It says 20,000 acre, but it was actually 2,000 acre because there's all these other parcels. If we see that, can we say that to you guys? Or is this something that your data team is like, working on how we get to, how do we flesh that out on the front end before it gets uploaded, or kind of what do you think is the future of that?
I'd say it's a combination. The data team is working on this constantly and has been described, there's just a lot of eyes and a lot of hands on it, working on it ahead of it being in the platform itself under that data layer, but absolutely bring it to our attention. And then we can work with anyone that has discovered a sale to be able to, in effect, correct that in acres and have that information be usable for building that comparative analysis. So absolutely, Tyler, you can reach out to me directly.
I will.
But I'd say this is something pretty common that myself and my team work on with folks. And even the ability to do this yourself and manage it. If you've got comps that you're managing within acres, you've got the ability to make those corrections and have it be ready to use.
I like it. And Ben, you might have already kind of alluded to what your guys are. I mean, I'm a visionary, so in my brain, I'm trying to think like, I don't even know how your data team would really be able to pick up on, hey, there was a assessor sale, and it goes to this parcel. I mean, they'd honestly have to almost scrub the map or something to even catch that there's multiple tracks that had sold with that one parcel. So good luck over there. Yeah. Good luck.
Don't try this at home is the takeaway, right? It's hard, it's difficult, and takes a lot of time and money, Tyler.
Yeah, they got some big shoulders over there because all of us just want to yell, why are we getting the wrong comp over here? You ruined my business on one sale. So I want to dive outside of acres here. I got a question that is more we typically talk about what we're seeing in the market. And I'll be honest, I don't really study stock market and I don't really watch a lot of news. I think a lot of news is noise lots of times. And one of my very favorite pastors talked about this and I think some news is noise, but my question for you guys, because you're about 72 million times smarter than me in the land space, which has been clearly made known. What do you think? It's early 2025 here. We've had obviously a new election, regardless of what side of the fence you were on with this election. If we're going to talk about the elephant in the room here of land and what the market's doing and rates and things, like Ben, Audrey, either one of you, are you willing to share, like, what's your gut? What are you seeing in the space? What do you think people should be prepared for? And I may shift it and say, hey, how are you helping them prepare for this?
Yeah. So let's talk about the land market. So Audrey and I are lucky in that our customers are from all over the U.S. and they work in different types of land brokerage. We've covered a bunch of those different types: recreational, farming, non-ag, that kind of stuff. And so we get this broad scope of the market of what's happening, because people call in and say, I'm trying to do this and here's why. And so it's always really interesting to hear how one region differs from the other. And so the first thing I'll say about the market is almost like a disclaimer, is what you would probably say about any residential market too, is that every sub-market behaves a little bit differently than the other one, right? So there are some like big macro trends that influence things. Interest rates always influence real estate values. Yep. But then within sub-markets, there's going to be things like, is a new employer coming into town? Are they putting a new shopping center, distribution center over here? So always know that it's regional, but we can draw some broad conclusions. And I would say for productive commercial cropland, what we see is a pretty stable market. Last couple of years, we saw huge run-ups in value, 5, 6, 7, 8% per year appreciation, and that's moderated some. I think some markets are flat to maybe 1 to 2% annual growth. Markedly not necessarily declining in value, but declining in the rate of growth of those values, right? Yes. So that's an important nuance there. And so we overall see a stable land market. There's big question marks in the California market, mainly related to tariffs and tree nut exports, walnuts, almonds, pecans, et cetera, pistachios. So there's big question marks about how tariffs will hit the tree nut market, which dominates the Central Valley. But outside of California, I think most places look like a fairly stable land market right now, with everyone kind of saying, we'll wait and see. They want to see what happens with tariffs. They want to see the first year of a new administration, what happens. And so they want to know where interest rates are going to go. And so uncertainty does kind of, it locks up buyers and sellers, but that means, we're not seeing huge gains or huge declines in values ultimately. So that's the first trend, is wait and see approach, kind of moderate gains, but not what we've seen in the last few years. The other big trend is what we touched on earlier, is non-ag land uses. So if you look at sort of the current state of affairs in the United States, We're behind on new home construction. We're behind on power generation. We're behind on power transmission infrastructure. We're behind on data center construction. All these things need land. And so that's the other big trend we see, is that there's just all these things that we have to continue advancing, growing, and housing people rely on land. And so I see further and further pressure on that, even more so than we saw the last 10 years. So that's kind of the next decade ahead in my view, or the 2020s at least in my view, is all these folks who are going to be looking for land. So if you're an investor, flipper, real estate agent, like, you should be excited about that, because it means more customers for you, more people asking questions about land in your market. And if you're not already thinking about how do I expand and find customers who don't come from an ag background, you need to be, because that's kind of going to be the future, particularly communities on the fringes of these larger cities in the Midwest, the South, et cetera.
Man, yeah. So you just said something that's just really helpful for us. That the increase in land value, or that rapid increase, is starting to normalize and stabilize. Just you're saying there's a decrease in that rate of increase, which, weird play on words, but I understand what you mean. The ramp is a little less of an incline right now. It is still an incline. Ben, Audrey, I've got a question that you maybe can't answer. This is purely curiosity for me. I've not been in the land space long enough to have studied this, but do you know, in your guys' data world or brains, do you know of a time that land values ever went down?
There's one particular scenario that if you talk to economists and ag scholars, they're always going to bring this example up, and this is the 1980s farm crisis.
Okay.
And effectively, we had a over-leveraged farm economy, a lot of bankruptcies and defaults on farmland real estate, and a lot of people went out of business in the 80s. It was not pretty, and this mainly had to do with dramatically increasing interest rates and dramatically decreasing commodity prices, met and intersected at the wrong time, wrong place. And a lot of people, unfortunately, went bankrupt and defaulted on their loans. And so a ton of safeguards have been put into the system since then, right? In terms of loan to value ratios on loans, in terms of government programs to support commodity prices, all these little buffers and safeguards have been injected into the U.S. agricultural economy since the 80s to prevent that from happening again. And if you look at what's sort of overall debt and leverage in the farm economy today, we're radically under levered in terms of historical rates. And so that warning sign is not flashing today. It hasn't been in 30 some odd years. So overall, if you look at, let's call it the modern history of U.S. farmland going back to post-World War II, basically, there's been one time where we had significant declines in land values, and this was the farm crisis in the 80s. No one can predict the future. I'm certainly not going to do that on your podcast today, but I think we learned a lot of lessons from that, and we put some bumpers into the system so that we can avoid triggering that kind of event in the future. I think that's a reason you should be optimistic and have a positive outlook about farmland values, because we have gone through some of those shocks in the past and adjusted to them.
Very good. Very good. I obviously wasn't even a thought until 1988. So I didn't experience that. But what I have, being in residential real estate, what we always talk about is the 2008 crash. And I was not in the 2008 crash either. And you said it, that in 2008, I know what happened in residential real estate was that a lot of buffers were put in place, bumper strips, policy and procedure to prevent that from ever happening again. And anyone that's been through that crash has said, we're never going to see that type of thing again. There's too many layers and too many modes of protection in place for that to happen. So it's interesting to hear you say that in the 80s, this happened in land, and that same thing happened, that there was, obviously layers put in place to prevent that from happening. Last thing I would want to talk about, because we could spend hours and hours and hours. Of course, we're going to dive deeper offline here on how you guys can help me not be so bad at land. But last question for the microcosm of our economy right now. What I heard a farmer say last week in Illinois that just struck me as interesting, because I'm not a large scale farmer. I work with large scale farmers in trying to transact with their land, but these tariffs, and as we're talking, we've got all these things that are going on in our own economy, that these tariffs, I am hearing this ripple effect, that these tariffs are obviously causing the price of grain or things to potentially go down, and that a lot of these farmers are A, nervous to buy, and B, nervous to continue to push. Let's say they were going to plant more acres this year, be more aggressive, that I'm hearing they're not. Ben, Audrey, whomever, are you guys hearing or seeing, feeling any kind of a sentiment about this current, because I will say if someone listened to us in 2 years, this is probably not even a thing, but currently we are having this tariff talk and how that's affecting our economy right now. How is this affecting farmers?
Yeah. I like the question. So you mentioned if someone's listening in 2 years, it might not be relevant. If someone's listening in 2 weeks, it might not be relevant. Things are changing.
Great.
So quickly.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're on again, off again is the truth, right? So no one really knows. And that's why I said there's a wait and see approach from landowners, investors, buyers, sellers. They want to know, how does this ultimately shake out? So we're still in the sausage making process of our trade policy right now. But what I would say is that the thing that listeners need and Americans generally need to know is that the American farmer is an exporter. We rely on export markets for most of our products because we grow way too much that we cannot consume by ourselves, right? So particularly soybeans, tree nuts, things like that. Like, we are not consuming and using anywhere near the majority of those products. So we rely on foreign markets to sell those things. And so when you have high trade barriers, those prices suffer. And so there is a direct line from tariffs to lower prices for farmers, right? So it's inevitable. That's just a fundamental economic fact, is that tariffs impact farm gate prices for producers in the United States. However, what are people going to do about it? So first of all, farmers might shift crops around a little bit. So we export more soybeans than we do corn, for example. So you might see acres go into corn and out of soybeans as one example. The other thing we saw last time we had tariffs, so whatever, 4, 5, 6 years ago, what people did was they cut back on inputs for their crop, right? So I might spend a little bit less on my macros, on my nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium this year because I've got a smaller crop budget than I did the previous year. So I might cut back on those things. And what's interesting about that is that's fine. You can get away with it for maybe a year, 2 years, but you ultimately start seeing it ripple through average crop yields for the United States. And so what impact that has on prices at the end of the year, who's to say? It's kind of hard to guess at a huge, we have hundreds of millions of acres of cropland, but I think you'll see people cut back on macro applications. And then, the third thing to think about is that the single most popular persona or demographic in the United States is the American farmer. And it has bipartisan support, agriculture does. And I think everyone has sort of an emotional, sometimes, connection to agriculture, if not an economic one. And I think that in the United States, it is difficult to envision a world in which we don't have robust support policies for farmers. And so, there's pros and cons to that. But I think you need to remember that we have always stood behind farmers from a policy standpoint in the U.S., and I wouldn't bet against that going forward. So that's how I think about it. Acreage changes of what's getting planted, cutting back on applications of phosphorus, potassium, et cetera. And then ultimately, there's going to be some policy solution to any pain that the ag system faces, because it's just not acceptable in the United States, at least today, to not support our farmers.
Okay, let's go. Audrey, this may be a question for Ben, but I want to have you answer it anyway, just for the fun of this. Ben, I mean, if I could regurgitate the society he is part of, that's why he knows all this stuff. He's a society member, not just general society. Ben, what is the society again?
The American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers.
See, guys, when you're part of that, you know stuff. This will be my true last question, because I could spend hours with you guys. I hope you listeners can obviously see there's an incredible wealth of information and know-how and brain power over at Acres. And then there happens to be an awesome software that they provide with it. So, Audrey, I heard a realtor last week, a friend of mine in Illinois, he said, and Ben, you can chime in if you must, he said that he tied the tariff. He said, we're finally starting to see a dip in tillable prices because of these tariffs and things like that. And I found that interesting that he's saying we're finally starting to see a dip in tillable prices. And he did say a year ago, he said, we thought when rates went up that we would see a slowdown in the land market, and we didn't. And he does harp on guys like me, or the recreational, the rec guys, the rec land buyers are messing the market up. By the way, it's like 90% of his business. So interesting concept for him to state. But I'm curious, do we actually think that this tariff thing is going to affect he says tillable prices. And we talked about, does land go down? Audrey, Ben, what do you think?
Ooh, this one might be a little bit outside of my wheelhouse.
You're allowed to speculate, though. You talk to people. Are you hearing this?
I can speak absolutely from the customer standpoint here. And right now, I have not heard these concerns from our users and people that I'm interacting with every day. If anything, I'm seeing a trend of users becoming even more aggressive with transacting, getting into the game, expanding their business. That's been a huge trend that I've noticed, is a lot of expansion. And so not really any negatives or red flags from the user perspective.
Very good. Very good. I mean, of course, being on the front lines, I'm sure you hear the murmuring, but Ben, you're hearing people murmurs, are still bullish.
A lot of people wanting to be aggressive and be in the game for sure.
Yep.
Look, I presume most people listening to this are in the land business, or at least aspiring to be in the land business. And this is a long-term game, right? You don't get into land, particularly farmland, to play short-term games. And so I think about sentiment versus structure. And is there negative sentiment if you go to any given auction? Yeah, of course there is. Tariffs, all the bad news, blah, blah, blah. These feel like headwinds, but that's sentiment. And if you look at structure, which is interest rates, it's aggregate demand for major commodity crops, it's government policy. Structure has not changed in the last 6 months. Sentiment has, related to mainly threats of mostly tariffs. And so I'm of the perspective that you might measure negative sentiment, but what you need to do is step back and look at the structure. And I think the structure is radically unchanged from the end of last year. And so therefore my outlook doesn't change on where things are at.
I love those two words. That's exactly right. It's almost like for us, we talk about operating on principle instead of emotion. And, for you, sentiment is emotion and structure is principle. And principle doesn't lie. The principle factors are there that spell out whether we're going to see a real ripple effect from this or not. Sentiment and emotion may say, well, sure, if you measure it from a 2-month window, you might see it. You might see a bubble. You measure it from a 200-year window, and it wasn't a blink. So I love that. All right. So the thing that I cannot forget to plug here before we wrap up, I could spend hours and hours with you guys. It's just been incredibly beneficial. I really appreciate you guys doing this. One of two things here. So number one is, are there things you guys think that we could cover or things you want the listeners to know about that we haven't already talked about? And I'll hold you hostage for a second. And then the second one is, can you, if in answering that, can you tell a listener, hey, I'm hook, line, and sinker. I want to know about this acres thing. What do your pricing packages look like? What is, you've got an intermediate who just barely needs to know what a parcel is. And then you've got a guy that wants to understand 76 layers and where the utilities are and what the heat maps for data centers are. Everything in between. What's the structure look like, and how do they get to you guys? How do they get into the world of being an acres user?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Just go to acres.com. We've got all of our pricing there. And like you said, it's sort of self-service of I want a little bit of data to I want a lot of data. And ultimately, what I want people to know is that you can just try this for free. So you can start it.
For free. Absolutely.
And if you don't like it, that's fine. But if you do like it, then you obviously can continue using it. You can choose a higher tier if you need more information. So it's pretty self-directed and self-serve. And yeah, we let you try it without any cost up front. So.
Love it. Love it. Well, it goes without saying, there's a wealth of information over here, and taking a bite of an elephant, which is land, has just become much, much easier working with you guys. So I'm really appreciative of you being on here. I'm appreciative of the software. I'm also appreciative of the challenge that you guys daily face of continuing to chase greatness. So I like that. I really do like that. And that's a big word, in our space, it's a big word, but if you can help someone's job or business or lifestyle be better because of a product and a service you offer, then you're winning. And that's what you guys are after doing. So I do think it is chasing greatness. So I appreciate this. If you've listened long enough, thank you. Hopefully you've enjoyed this content, and we will see you next week on Legacy Through Land.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you're finding value in this content, we'd love to hear from you. It'd mean a lot if you could share with us how this podcast is helping you on your journey, and let us know of any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Be sure to connect with us on all social platforms at Legacy Acres Land Co. and subscribe to stay updated on when new episodes drop. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Legacy Through Land podcast, and we'll see you next week.